Don't jump. A poor single dad's desperate words stop a stranger from ending it all. But when that stranger secretly holds the power to save the only home this father has left, one question remains. Will hope be enough to keep them from losing everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The January wind howled through the empty streets, carrying flurries of snow that danced in the glow of streetlights. Ethan Parker's old sedan rumbled along the highway, its heater struggling against the bitter cold. His shoulders ached from 12 hours of lifting packages, and his eyes felt heavy. But he was almost home, almost back to Lily. The dashboard clock blinked 11:42 p.m. He pictured his daughter, probably fast asleep by now under the care of Mrs. Martinez, their elderly neighbor. The thought of Lily's peaceful face gave him the energy to keep driving, even as exhaustion tugged at him. Then he saw it, a dark figure, standing on the edge of the overpass bridge, barely visible in the dim light. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The figure swayed slightly, too close to the edge for comfort. Without thinking, Ethan hit his brakes. The car skidded slightly on the slick road before coming to a stop on the shoulder. He jumped out, leaving the driver's door open, engine still running. "Don't jump!" The words burst from his throat, carried away by the wind. The figure flinched but didn't move from the edge. Ethan's work boots crunched in the snow as he moved closer, careful not to startle the man he could see now. It was a man, probably in his 50s, wearing what looked like an expensive coat. "Please," Ethan called out, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Whatever it is, it's not worth this. Trust me, I know life can feel impossible sometimes." His heart hammered in his chest as he took another careful step forward. The man's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. Encouraged by the lack of rejection, Ethan continued, "I'm a single dad. Every day is a struggle. Sometimes I can barely keep food on the table, and the bills." He swallowed hard. "But my daughter, she needs me, and someone needs you too." The wind whistled between them, carrying snowflakes that stuck to their clothes. The man's head tilted slightly, listening. "My little girl, Lily, she's 10. Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. "Every morning, no matter how tired I am, her smile makes it worth it. Even when I feel like I'm failing her, when I can't give her everything she deserves, she still looks at me like I'm her hero." The man's hands, gripping the railing, trembled visibly now. Ethan was close enough to see the tears freezing on his cheeks. "Life is hard," Ethan continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes it feels like we're drowning, but there's always hope. Always. Even if we can't see it right now." He reached out slowly, not touching the man but offering his hand. "Please, step back. Let's talk about this." For a moment that felt like eternity, nothing moved except the swirling snow. Then, slowly, the man's grip on the railing loosened, his shoulders slumped, and he took an unsteady step backward, away from the edge. Ethan moved forward quickly but carefully, ready to catch him if he stumbled. The man's legs seemed to give out, and he sank to his knees in the snow, his expensive coat getting soaked. His body shook with silent sobs. "I lost everything," the man whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "My business, my reputation, my purpose all gone. I thought this was the only way out." Ethan knelt beside him, putting a steady hand on his shoulder. The cold from the snow seeped through his work pants, but he hardly noticed. "There's always another way," he said softly. "Always." They sat there for a moment, two strangers connected by a moment of crisis, while the snow fell silently around them. Finally, Ethan squeezed the man's shoulder gently. "I'm Ethan. What's your name?" The man lifted his tear-stained face, meeting Ethan's eyes for the first time. "Michael," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. "My name is Michael." The cold night air bit at their faces as Ethan gently guided Michael toward his car. Michael hesitated, his worn dress shoes crunching in the snow. "I couldn't impose," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. His shoulders hunched against the wind, making his tall frame seem smaller. "It's not an imposition," Ethan replied firmly. "At least come have some coffee and warm up. Nobody should be alone on a night like this." Michael stood still for a moment, looking lost. His expensive coat, now wrinkled and stained, hung loosely on his frame. Finally, he gave a slight nod and followed Ethan to the car. The drive was quiet, except for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers pushing away snowflakes. Ethan glanced occasionally at his passenger, noting how Michael's hands trembled slightly in his lap. "My daughter Lily might still be up," Ethan said softly as they pulled into the driveway of a small worn house. "She usually waits for me, even though she's supposed to be in bed." Inside, warm light spilled from the kitchen window, As they stepped through the front door, the sweet smell of hot chocolate filled the air. A small figure appeared in the doorway, Lily, wearing pink pajamas decorated with unicorns, her dark hair in messy braids. "Daddy," she called out, then stopped short when she noticed Michael. Her blue eyes widened with curiosity, but she didn't retreat. "Lily, this is Michael," Ethan said, helping Michael out of his coat. "He's going to join us for a late snack." Lily gave a shy smile and waved. "Hi, Michael. I made hot chocolate. Would you like some?" Michael's voice cracked as he replied, "That's very kind of you. Lily, why don't you make some sandwiches while I heat up some soup?" Ethan suggested, moving toward the kitchen. The room was small but tidy, with worn linoleum floors and outdated cabinets. A child's drawings decorated the refrigerator, bringing color to the space. Lily worked quietly at the counter, carefully spreading peanut butter on wheat bread. Michael sat at the small kitchen table, his large frame making the wooden chair seem even more fragile than it was. "You don't have to go to any trouble," Michael protested weakly. "It's no trouble," Lily assured him, placing a plate with neatly cut triangles of peanut butter sandwiches in front of him. "Daddy always says sharing makes the food taste better." Ethan stirred a pot of tomato soup on the stove, adding a little extra water to make it stretch further. The kitchen filled with comfortable warmth and the smell of food. As they sat around the table, Michael stared at his soup bowl, his spoon moving listlessly through the red liquid. "I had a real estate development company," he said suddenly, his voice hollow. "Built it from nothing. Then the market crashed, and I made some bad decisions. Lost everything. My partners, my savings, my reputation." He swallowed hard. "I feel so useless now." Lily looked up from her sandwich with concern in her young eyes. Ethan set down his spoon and leaned forward slightly. "I understand feeling lost," Ethan said quietly. "After Lily's mom left, I could barely get out of bed some days. But Lily needed breakfast, needed to get to school. Those simple needs kept me going." Lily reached across the table and touched Michael's hand. "Daddy works really hard. Sometimes he has 2 jobs, but he always reads me a story at bedtime." Michael's eyes grew misty. "How do you keep going?" he asked Ethan. "One day at a time," Ethan replied, his weathered face showing both exhaustion and determination. "Some days are harder than others. The heating bill comes due, or Lily needs new shoes. But I keep faith that tomorrow might be better. And honestly, having Lily counting on me, it gives me purpose." "You're very lucky to have each other," Michael said softly. "We are," Ethan agreed, watching as Lily gathered the empty bowls. "And tonight, we're lucky to have company." After the dishes were done and Lily had been tucked into bed, Ethan made up the couch with clean sheets and their warmest blanket. It wasn't much. The blanket was worn thin in spots, and one corner had been patched, but it was offered with genuine kindness. Michael stood awkwardly in the small living room, looking at the second-hand furniture and the carefully mended curtains. Family photos lined one wall, showing Lily at different ages, always smiling beside her father. "Thank you," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for this, but for..." He gestured vaguely, unable to find words for everything he wanted to express. "Get some rest," Ethan said gently. "Things often look different in the morning." As Ethan turned toward his bedroom, Michael sank onto the couch, running his hands over the soft, clean sheets. In this modest home, surrounded by signs of struggle, but also of love and resilience, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. A glimmer of hope. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm patches across the worn linoleum floor. The gentle hum of the refrigerator mixed with the sounds of breakfast preparation as Lily stood at the counter, carefully spreading peanut butter on whole wheat bread. "Don't forget your apple," Ethan reminded her, packing her lunchbox while simultaneously trying to tie his work boots. His delivery uniform was already wrinkled from yesterday's long shift, but he hadn't had time to iron it. Lily glanced toward the living room where Michael was still sleeping on their old plaid couch, his tall frame barely fitting. "Is Michael okay, Daddy?" she whispered, her blue eyes filled with concern. Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. "He's going through a rough time, sweetheart. He's going to stay with us for a few days while he gets back on his feet." He knelt down to her level, making sure she understood. "Is that all right with you?" Lily nodded, her braids bobbing. "Of course, like when Jenny stayed with us when her mom was sick?" She referenced their neighbor from last year, showing wisdom beyond her 10 years. "That's right," Ethan smiled, touched by her immediate acceptance. Just like that, there was a creak from the living room, and Michael appeared in the doorway, looking somewhat disheveled but more composed than the night before. He'd borrowed one of Ethan's old t-shirts to sleep in, and it hung loosely on his frame. "Good morning," he said softly, clearly uncomfortable with intruding on their morning routine. "Good morning," Lily chirped, already reaching for another piece of bread. "Would you like some breakfast? I make really good peanut butter sandwiches." Michael's face softened at her offer. "That's very kind of you, Lily." Ethan checked his watch and grabbed his keys. "I've got to head out for my delivery route. Michael, please make yourself at home. There's coffee in the pot and—" He hesitated. "Well, help yourself to whatever you can find." "I appreciate your hospitality," Michael said, his voice carrying a weight of gratitude that went beyond simple courtesy. "Is there anything I can do to help while you're gone?" Ethan shrugged. "Nothing really, unless you know how to fix a cabinet door. The one above the sink's been loose for months." "I actually do know a thing or two about home repairs," Michael offered, some life returning to his eyes. "I'd be happy to take a look." After Ethan dropped Lily at school, the house fell into a different kind of quiet. Michael stood in the kitchen, examining the cabinet door with careful attention. The hinges were worn, but fixable. He found a screwdriver in a drawer and began working, grateful for something practical to focus on. As the morning wore on, Michael discovered more small tasks to occupy himself. He tightened the wobbly kitchen chair legs, fixed a sticking drawer, and even managed to stop the dripping bathroom faucet. Each repair felt like a tiny payment toward the immense debt of gratitude he owed this family. Around noon, he discovered some soup cans in the pantry. The selection was sparse, mostly basic items bought on sale. It painted a clear picture of careful budgeting and stretched resources. Michael heated up some soup, his thoughts drifting to the empire he'd lost, the wealth he'd once taken for granted. The afternoon light was starting to fade when Ethan's truck pulled into the driveway. Michael could hear Lily's animated chatter as they approached the front door. Her voice carrying through the thin walls, she burst in first, backpack bouncing. "Michael, you're still here!" she exclaimed, genuinely pleased to see him. "Daddy, can Michael help me with my math homework? He seems smart." Ethan followed behind her, looking worn from his day of deliveries. "Let's not bother Michael with—" he started, but stopped short when he noticed the kitchen. "Did you fix the cabinet?" Michael nodded. "And a few other things. It was the least I could do." "The chair doesn't wobble anymore," Lily discovered, testing it with delight. "I'll start dinner," Ethan said, clearly moved but trying to maintain normalcy. "Lily, homework first." "I'll check the mail," Michael offered, wanting to continue being useful. "No need," Ethan said, already heading toward the door. "I've got it." The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of purple and orange as Ethan walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The metal box creaked as he opened it, pulling out a small stack of envelopes. Bills, mostly. He could tell by their shape and size, but one official-looking envelope caught his attention. Standing under the fading light, Ethan tore it open. His eyes scanned the formal letterhead, and his hand began to shake. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. Notice of eviction, 30 days to vacate the premises. The paper trembled in his grasp as the weight of reality settled over him. Inside, he could hear Lily laughing at something Michael had said, the sound drifting through the window into the gathering dusk. The kitchen felt smaller that evening as Ethan stirred a pot of mac and cheese, his movements mechanical. The eviction notice burned in his back pocket like a hot coal. He added an extra splash of milk to make the pasta stretch further, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. "Dad, can you help me with my science project tomorrow?" Lily asked from her place at the table, legs swinging beneath her chair. "We're supposed to make a model of the solar system." Ethan forced a smile, though his chest felt tight. "Sure, sweetheart. We'll figure something out." Michael sat quietly at the table, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. His keen eyes tracked Ethan's tense shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone, the slight tremor in his hands as he served dinner. "I got an A on my spelling test today," Lily announced proudly, stabbing at her macaroni with enthusiasm. "Miss Thompson said my handwriting is getting much better." "That's wonderful, honey." Ethan's voice caught slightly, and he quickly took a sip of water. Michael leaned forward, engaging Lily. "What was the hardest word to spell?" "Necessary," Lily replied, wrinkling her nose. "But I remembered it has one collar and two sleeves. That's how you spell it, right?" "That's clever," Michael said warmly, though his concerned gaze kept drifting to Ethan. The meal continued with Lily's cheerful chatter filling the silence. She told him about recess games and lunch trades, while Ethan pushed food around his plate, barely eating. Michael noticed how Ethan's eyes would sometimes go distant, glazing over with worry before he'd snap back to attention when Lily addressed him directly. "Time for bed, kiddo," Ethan said when Lily's plate was empty. "Don't forget to brush your teeth." "Can I read one more chapter of my book first?" Lily pleaded. Just one, Ethan agreed, managing a genuine smile as she hugged him goodnight. I'll come tuck you in soon. After Lily disappeared down the hall, silence settled over the kitchen like a heavy blanket. The only sounds were running water as Michael washed dishes and Ethan packed away leftovers, their movements careful and quiet. When Ethan returned from tucking Lily in, Michael was drying his hands on a dish towel. The kitchen was clean, but the tension remained thick in the air. Want to tell me what's wrong? Michael asked softly. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the crumpled notice, smoothing it against the table with trembling fingers. Got this today, he said, voice rough. 30 days to get out. Michael picked up the paper, reading it carefully. The formal language was cold and impersonal. Notice to vacate. Failure to receive timely payment. Property sold. New ownership requires immediate possession. I'm 3 months behind on rent, Ethan admitted, sinking into a chair. Been trying to catch up, picking up extra shifts when I can. But between Lily's medications and the car repairs last month, he ran a hand through his hair. I thought I could make it work. I really did. Michael set the notice down carefully. Have you talked to the landlord? Maybe worked out a payment plan? Called him right after I got this. He said his hands are tied. Property's already been sold. Ethan's laugh was hollow. Funny thing is, I always told Lily that if we worked hard enough, everything would be okay. Now, I don't know how to keep a roof over her head. The admission seemed to drain what little energy Ethan had left. He slumped forward, elbows on the table, head in his hands. She loves her school, her friends. This is the only home she's known since her mom passed. And I'm about to take it all away from her. Michael stood perfectly still, watching this man who had, just the night before, talked him back from the edge of despair. The same man who had opened his home despite having so little to share. Now, Ethan sat defeated at his own kitchen table, the weight of failure crushing his spirit. The sound of Lily's voice drifted from down the hall as she read aloud to herself, the innocent melody of it making Ethan's shoulders shake slightly. Michael's hands clenched around the eviction notice, his mind racing back to the overpass. He remembered the bitter wind, the dizzying height, the absolute certainty that he had nothing left to live for. Then Ethan's voice had cut through the darkness, offering hope when Michael thought he was beyond saving. Looking around the modest kitchen with its mismatched chairs and carefully mended curtains, Michael felt something shift inside him. This home might be small and worn, but it was filled with love. The kind of love that made a tired father stop for a stranger, that made a little girl set out sandwiches for someone she'd never met. His eyes fell on Lily's spelling test, stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet, her neat handwriting promising better things to come. The sight of it strengthened his resolve. Michael carefully refolded the eviction notice, his expression darkening with determination. He had failed at many things in his life, but he would not fail this family, not when they had given him back his will to live. He looked at Ethan, still hunched over the table, and silently made his vow. The gift of life Ethan had given him on that overpass would be returned, one way or another. Michael just had to figure out how. The afternoon sun warmed the small living room where Michael sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing the mess of papers and receipts Ethan had asked him to sort through. His fingers moved methodically, creating neat stacks, when a small shadow fell across the carpet. "Hi, Michael," Lily said, clutching something behind her back. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 slightly uneven pigtails, and she wore her favorite purple sweater with a unicorn on it. Michael looked up, offering a gentle smile. "Hi there, Lily. What have you got there?" She rocked back and forth on her heels, suddenly shy. "I made you something." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "In art class today." Michael set aside the stack of papers, giving her his full attention. "You did? That's very thoughtful of you." Lily brought her hands forward, revealing a piece of folded construction paper decorated with swirls of crayon colors. The front showed what appeared to be 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one with pigtails. "Open it," she urged, pushing it toward him. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the card. Inside, in careful child's handwriting surrounded by hearts and stars, were the words, "You matter. God sent you to us." The simple message hit him like a physical force. His vision blurred, and he had to blink several times to clear it. In the doorway, unnoticed by either of them, Ethan stood watching, his own eyes glistening. "Do you like it?" Lily asked, her face full of hope. Michael opened his arms, and Lily rushed into them without hesitation. He held her close, this precious child who saw worth in him when he'd forgotten how to see it himself. "I love it," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, sweetheart." From the doorway, Ethan cleared his throat softly. Hey, kiddo, why don't you show Michael that board game you were talking about earlier? I've got to head to work soon. Lily bounced up, excitement replacing her earlier shyness. Oh yes, do you like Candyland, Michael? It's my favorite. I haven't played in years, Michael admitted, carefully setting the card on the coffee table. You'll have to teach me. While Lily ran to get the game from her room, Ethan stepped into the living room. You okay with watching her tonight? My shift runs until 11. Of course, Michael said, still trying to compose himself. We'll be fine. Ethan nodded, his eyes falling on the card. She has a way of seeing right through to the heart of things, doesn't she? She's special, Michael agreed softly. You've done an amazing job with her, Ethan. Before Ethan could respond, Lily returned with the game box. Found it. Can we play now? I've got to head out, sweetie, Ethan said, checking his watch. Be good for Michael, okay? Bedtime's at 8:30. Lily hugged her father tightly. Love you, Dad. Be careful. Love you too, Princess. Ethan grabbed his keys and jacket, giving Michael a grateful nod before heading out. The evening passed in a blur of colored squares and laughter. They played 3 rounds of Candyland, and Michael found himself genuinely enjoying the simple pleasure of the game. Lily proved to be an enthusiastic teacher, explaining all her strategies for reaching the Candy Castle first. Uncle Michael, it's your turn, she said, pushing the cards toward him. Michael's heart squeezed at the casual way she'd bestowed the title. He drew a card, moving his piece to the next blue square. Like this? Perfect. She beamed at him. You're getting better. Maybe next time you'll win. After the games, they made sandwiches for dinner. Lily insisted on helping, carefully spreading peanut butter while Michael handled the jelly. They ate at the kitchen table, where Lily told him about her school day and her best friend Emma. Dad says you used to have a big company, she said suddenly, swinging her legs under the table. Michael paused mid-bite. I did, yes. What happened to it? I made some mistakes, he said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, even when they're trying their best. Lily considered this, taking a thoughtful bite of her sandwich. That's okay. Daddy says everybody makes mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers. Michael couldn't help but smile at her simple wisdom. Your daddy's a smart man. At bedtime, Lily insisted on a story. Michael found himself making up a tale about a brave little girl who helped a lost knight find his way home. She drifted off before he reached the ending, her breathing deep and even. Later, sitting alone in the quiet living room, Michael picked up Lily's card again. The crayon colors seemed to glow in the soft lamplight. His fingers traced the words, remembering the pure intention behind them. You matter, he whispered, echoing the words that had pierced his darkness. God sent you to us. He thought about the night on the overpass, how close he'd come to ending everything. If Ethan hadn't stopped, if he hadn't shown such kindness to a stranger, if this little girl hadn't opened her heart to him. Looking at the card one more time, Michael's voice was barely audible in the quiet room. Maybe I still have a purpose. The aroma of butter and vanilla filled the small kitchen as Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the window above the sink. Ethan stood at the stove, expertly flipping a golden brown pancake while Lily perched on a step stool beside him, her eyes wide with concentration as she stirred the batter. Can I flip the next one, Dad? Lily asked, her pigtails bouncing with excitement. Sure, Princess. Just remember what I taught you. Wait for the bubbles before you flip. Ethan slid the finished pancake onto a growing stack on a chipped blue plate. At the kitchen table, Michael sat with the morning newspaper spread out before him, a red pen in hand. His reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he carefully circled listings in the classifieds. The sound of his pen scratching against the paper mixed with the sizzle of batter hitting the hot griddle. Look, Bubbles! Lily pointed at the cooking pancake, practically vibrating with anticipation. Okay, steady now. Ethan handed her the spatula, his hands hovering nearby as she attempted the flip. The pancake landed half-folded, but Lily beamed with pride. I did it, she declared, turning to Michael. Did you see? Sure did, Chef. Michael smiled warmly, then turned to Ethan. Hey, when you get a minute, I'd like to run some ideas by you. Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly, but he kept his voice light for Lily's sake. About what? The situation. Michael tapped the newspaper meaningfully. I've been doing some research, making some calls to old contacts. There might be options we haven't considered. We? Ethan's voice carried an edge of defensiveness. He helped Lily pour another perfect circle of batter onto the griddle. Listen, Michael, I appreciate the thought, but Dad, Lily interrupted, tugging at his sleeve. The pancake's bubbling again? Here, sweetie. Ethan guided her hands through another flip. This one more successful than the last? Beautiful job. Michael set down his pen and pushed his glasses up, Ethan, I know you're proud, but sometimes accepting help isn't about charity, it's about strategy. You helped me when I needed it most. Let me at least share what I know. Lily looked between the two men, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. Daddy always says 2 heads are better than 1 when I have trouble with my homework. A small smile tugged at Ethan's mouth despite himself. Using my own words against me, huh? Smart kid you've got there, Michael said, his eyes twinkling. Ethan sighed, his resistance softening. All right, after breakfast, we can talk. Lily clapped her hands, accidentally flicking pancake batter onto her cheek. Can I help too? Of course you can, sweetheart, Michael said before Ethan could protest. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. They worked together to finish the last of the batter, Lily managing to flip 2 more pancakes with increasing confidence. As Ethan placed the stack in the center of the table, Michael cleared away his papers to make room. I found real maple syrup at the store yesterday, Michael mentioned casually, pulling a bottle from a paper bag near his feet. Thought it might be nice for a change. Lily's eyes widened. Real maple syrup? Like from trees? The very same. Michael handed her the bottle, showing her how to open it. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said quietly, but there was gratitude in his voice. I wanted to. Michael passed around plates. Consider it my contribution to our Saturday morning. As they settled in to eat, Lily insisted on pouring the syrup herself, carefully creating tiny pools on each pancake. The first bite brought appreciative sounds from everyone. These are the best pancakes ever, Lily declared, syrup already sticky on her chin. They really are, Michael agreed, catching Ethan's eye. Your dad's quite the cook. Mom taught him. Lily said matter-of-factly, making Ethan pause mid-bite. But instead of the usual pain that accompanied mentions of his late wife, he felt a gentle warmth at the memory. She did, he confirmed softly. She always said pancakes taste better when they're made with love. Then that's why these are so good, Lily nodded sagely, because we all made them together. Michael reached for another pancake, his movements deliberate as he spoke. That's what I'm trying to say about the eviction situation, Ethan. Sometimes things work better when we tackle them together. Ethan looked at his daughter, happily drowning another pancake in syrup, then at Michael, whose face showed nothing but sincere concern and friendship. The weight that had been crushing his chest since receiving the notice seemed to lighten, just a fraction. Maybe you're right, he admitted, surprising himself with the words. Does this mean we get to be like detectives? Lily asked excitedly. Looking for clues to solve the problem? Michael chuckled. Something like that. Your dad and I will look at all the possibilities, and you can be our creative consultant. What's a consultant? Lily's forehead wrinkled in confusion. It means you're part of the team, Ethan explained, reaching over to wipe syrup from her chin. And you know what? I think we make a pretty good team already. Lily beamed, looking between the two men. Like with the pancakes. Exactly like with the pancakes, Michael agreed, raising his coffee mug in a mock toast. To Team Parker. To Team Parker, Lily echoed, lifting her glass of milk with such enthusiasm that it nearly spilled. Ethan found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time since the eviction notice arrived. The sound seemed to surprise all of them, but it broke something loose in the room. Soon they were all sharing stories and jokes, the kitchen filled with a kind of warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun or the cooling stack of pancakes. Looking at his daughter's syrup-stained smile and Michael's relaxed posture, Ethan felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. It was small, just a flicker, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, they would find a way through this after all. The early morning air bit through Ethan's jacket as he loaded boxes into his delivery van. His breath came out in white puffs, his fingers stiff from the cold. Michael stood nearby, clipboard in hand, helping to organize the day's route. If we plan this right, Michael said, marking the map with efficient precision, we can hit all these stops before noon. That leaves the afternoon for that moving job I found on the community board. Ethan nodded, grateful but uncomfortable with the help. You don't have to come with me, you know. These delivery runs aren't exactly exciting. I want to help. Michael's voice was firm. Besides, 2 pairs of hands move boxes faster than one. They worked in companionable silence, loading the last of the packages. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Ethan heard the front door open. Lily bounded down the steps, wrapped in her winter coat, clutching a shoebox. Look what I made. She opened the lid, revealing dozens of colorful friendship bracelets woven from embroidery thread. Mrs. Johnson next door taught me how. She says I can sell them for $2 each. Ethan's heart squeezed. Honey, you don't have to. I want to help too, Dad. Lily's determination mirrored his own. Mrs. Johnson says I can set up a table in front of her house after school. She'll watch me and everything. Michael knelt beside her, examining a bracelet. These are really good, Lily. You've got quite a talent there. She beamed at the praise, then hugged Ethan tight. Don't worry, Dad. We're all working together. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan and Michael tackled the delivery route. Between stops, they discussed options, made calls, and filled out assistance applications during lunch breaks. Michael's business experience proved invaluable as he helped Ethan navigate the complicated paperwork. There's a program that helps with utility bills, Michael explained, showing Ethan a form on his phone. And I found a food bank that could help stretch the grocery budget. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter. I've never needed. Everyone needs help sometimes, Michael cut in gently. Remember what you told me on that overpass? About hope and faith? The afternoon moving job was backbreaking work, but the extra cash would help. They hauled furniture until sunset, their muscles aching but spirits determined. When they finally returned home, they found Lily at the kitchen table, counting small bills. I sold 6 bracelets, she announced proudly. That's $12 whole. Ethan pulled her into a hug, his throat tight with emotion. That's wonderful, sweetheart, but you should keep that money for yourself. Lily shook her head stubbornly. It's for our house fund. Uncle Michael says every little bit helps. Later that night, after a simple dinner of pasta, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, her eyes heavy with sleep but still worried. Dad, she whispered, are we really going to have to move? Ethan smoothed her hair back, his heart aching. I promise I'll find a way. In the hallway, Michael stood quietly, unseen. His hands clenched at his sides as he listened to Lily's soft breathing and Ethan's gentle reassurances. The sight of this father's unwavering love for his daughter, despite all odds, strengthened Michael's resolve. He would find a way to help this family that had saved him, no matter what it took. Through the rest of the week, they fell into a rhythm. Ethan and Michael worked the delivery route in the mornings, chased down leads and odd jobs in the afternoons. Lily sold her bracelets after school, proudly adding to their house fund jar in the kitchen. Each small victory, each dollar saved, felt like a step toward hope. Michael watched Ethan push through exhaustion day after day, never complaining, always managing a smile for Lily. He saw the way Ethan skipped meals to ensure Lily had enough, how he worked through a developing cold without rest. The man's dedication to his daughter was a quiet kind of heroism that touched Michael deeply. The community began to take notice of their efforts. Mrs. Johnson spread the word about Lily's bracelets, bringing more customers. The local deli owner started slipping extra sandwiches into their lunch orders, small kindnesses that reminded them they weren't alone in their struggle. At night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Michael would sit at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, bills, applications, job listings. They worked like generals planning a campaign, fighting against time and circumstance with every resource they could muster. We'll figure this out, Michael would say, his voice carrying the weight of his promise. One day at a time, and Ethan, despite his pride and independence, began to believe him. The burden felt lighter shared between friends, the impossible a little more possible with each passing day. Standing in the hallway that night, hearing Ethan's promise to Lily, Michael knew with certainty that he would not let this family down. They had given him back his purpose, shown him the strength of love and determination. Now it was his turn to prove worthy of their trust. The winter sun peeked through the clouds as Ethan and Michael sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers and half-empty coffee mugs. They'd spent the morning planning routes and looking through job listings, but exhaustion weighed heavily on Ethan's shoulders. Michael drummed his fingers on the table, his expression thoughtful. You know, Ethan, there might be another way to handle this situation with your landlord. What do you mean? Ethan looked up from the classified section, dark circles under his eyes. Michael took a deep breath, his hands clasping together. I never told you what I used to do before everything fell apart. He paused, looking down at his worn sweater. I owned Reynolds Property Development. We had offices in 3 states. Ethan's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Reynolds Property. Wait, you're that Michael Reynolds? Michael corrected quietly. The company went under during the recession. Bad investments. Market crash. I lost everything. His voice cracked slightly. The night you found me on that overpass, I'd just sold my last asset. Ethan sat back in his chair, trying to process this revelation. He remembered seeing the Reynolds name on buildings downtown, reading about the company in the local papers. I had no idea. That's why I've been so hesitant to talk about it, Michael admitted. But Ethan, I still know the business. I understand property law, negotiations, contracts. Maybe I can help with your landlord. But why would you want to? Ethan asked, his voice soft. After everything you've been through, Michael's eyes drifted to Lily's card, still propped up on the counter. Because you and Lily showed me kindness when I had nothing. You gave me a reason to keep going. He straightened in his chair. Let me use what I know. Maybe we can work something out with your landlord. Ethan considered the offer. Watching Michael's earnest expression, this man who'd lost an empire was now offering to help save Ethan's modest home. Okay, he finally said. What's your plan? Michael pulled out a notepad, his demeanor shifting subtly. Despite his worn clothes, Ethan could now see glimpses of the businessman he'd once been. First, we need to understand your rental history, payment records, any improvements you've made to the property. Then we'll prepare a proposal. They spent the next hour gathering documents. Ethan pulled out folders from a kitchen drawer, showing years of on-time rent payments and careful maintenance of the house. Michael took detailed notes, occasionally nodding. This is good, he said, reviewing the papers. You've been an excellent tenant. That gives us leverage. The next morning, they stood outside the landlord's office building downtown. Ethan tugged at his collar, wearing his best shirt, the one he usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. Michael wore a borrowed tie from Ethan, his posture straight and professional despite his circumstances. Remember, Michael said quietly as they waited in the lobby, let me do most of the talking. I know how to speak their language. The landlord's secretary led them into a stark office where Mr. Harrison, a thin man with steel-gray hair, sat behind an imposing desk. He barely looked up from his computer. Mr. Parker, he said flatly, I received your message about wanting to discuss the eviction notice. Michael stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Harrison, I'm Michael Reynolds, here as Mr. Parker's advisor. We'd like to propose some alternatives to eviction. Harrison's eyebrows raised slightly at the name, but his expression remained cold. Reynolds? From Reynolds Property? The same, Michael acknowledged, not flinching from the recognition. We've prepared a detailed proposal that would benefit all parties involved. Michael laid out their case professionally, highlighting Ethan's perfect payment history and the improvements he'd made to the property. He suggested a graduated rent increase or a rent-to-own arrangement, his voice carrying the confidence of years of business negotiations. Mr. Parker has been an exemplary tenant for years, Michael continued. His stability adds value to your property. We're prepared to discuss various arrangements that would allow him to stay while ensuring your investment remains profitable. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged. Mr. Reynolds, while I appreciate your expertise, this discussion is pointless. He pulled out a folder, sliding a document across the desk. The property has already been sold. Contracts were signed last week. Ethan felt the room tilt slightly. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. Sold? He whispered. Yes, Harrison replied, gathering the papers they'd brought without looking at them. The new owners have different plans for the property. The eviction notice stands 30 days, as stated. Michael tried to press forward. Perhaps we could speak with the new owners. Arrange a meeting. That won't be necessary. Harrison cut him off, standing to signal the end of the meeting. The decision is final. Good day, gentlemen. Ethan rose slowly from his chair, his legs feeling heavy. All the hope he'd built up over the past hour crumbled away. He felt Michael's hand on his shoulder, steady and sympathetic, but couldn't bring himself to look up. They walked out of the office in silence, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Outside, the winter wind had picked up, cutting through their clothes. Ethan's shoulders slumped as the reality of their failed attempt settled over him. I'm sorry, Michael said softly. I really thought. Ethan just nodded, unable to form words around the lump in his throat. All he could think about was Lily's room, with its carefully decorated walls and the window where she liked to read. How would he tell her they had to leave the only home she'd ever known? The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his Sunday best, a clean but slightly faded blue button-down shirt tucked into his only pair of dress pants. Beside him, Lily sat in her favorite polka-dot dress, her legs swinging beneath the pew. Daddy, why are we here again? She whispered, tugging at his sleeve. Mrs. Thompson from next door recommended us to her church for something, Ethan explained quietly, still unsure himself about the details. Their elderly neighbor had been insistent they come this morning, her eyes twinkling with a secret she wouldn't share. Michael sat on Lily's other side, looking more at ease in the church setting despite his own worn clothing. He'd been staying with them for nearly 2 weeks now, and somehow his presence had become a comfort rather than an obligation. Reverend Adams, a tall man with kind eyes and silver hair, stepped up to the pulpit. Today, We gather not just as a congregation, but as a community that celebrates acts of kindness and faith in action. Ethan's attention drifted slightly as the Reverend spoke about community service and helping others. His mind was still on the eviction notice, on the mounting bills, on all the what-ifs that kept him awake at night. And now, Reverend Adams continued, his voice warming, I'd like to share a story that exemplifies the spirit of the Good Samaritan. He gestured toward their pew. Would Ethan Parker and his daughter Lily please come forward? Ethan froze. Lily looked up at him with wide eyes, while Michael gave him an encouraging nod. Slowly, Ethan stood, taking Lily's small hand in his. They made their way to the front, their footsteps echoing in the hushed church. 2 weeks ago, on one of the coldest nights of the year, Ethan Parker was driving home from work, Reverend Adams began. He spotted a stranger in distress on the highway overpass. Despite his own struggles as a single father, despite his exhaustion from a long day's work, Ethan stopped. He reached out to this stranger with compassion and kindness. Ethan's cheeks flushed as he realized Michael must have shared their story. He glanced back at his friend, who sat with tears in his eyes. But Ethan didn't stop there, the Reverend continued. He opened his home to this stranger, shared what little he had, and showed him that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. Mrs. Thompson stood up from her pew. I've lived next door to the Parkers for 3 years, she added, her voice carrying clearly through the church. I've watched Ethan work multiple jobs, never complaining, always finding time to help others. When my grandson was sick, he brought us soup. When my car wouldn't start, he was there with jumper cables. He represents the very best of our community. Other voices joined in. Neighbors and acquaintances Ethan hadn't even realized attended this church. The delivery manager from his morning route spoke about Ethan's reliability and kindness to customers. A mother from Lily's school mentioned how Ethan always helped with school events despite his demanding schedule. Lily squeezed his hand tight, beaming up at him with pride. Ethan blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. The church's Good Samaritan recognition comes with a small grant, Reverend Adams announced, holding up an envelope. It's not much, but it's our way of showing that when you give to others, the community gives back. The congregation broke into applause as the Reverend handed Ethan the envelope. Lily bounced on her toes, her face glowing with joy. Would anyone else like to share how Mr. Parker has touched their lives? Reverend Adams asked. A quiet voice spoke from the back. Michael stood, his hands trembling slightly. Ethan Parker saved my life, he said simply, not just by stopping that night, but by showing me that worth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. His voice grew stronger. He taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about love and acceptance. More applause filled the church. Ethan couldn't hold back his tears anymore as Lily wrapped her arms around his waist in a tight hug. Sometimes, Reverend Adams said softly, angels come in the form of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Thank you, Ethan, for reminding us of that truth. As the recognition ceremony concluded, people gathered around to shake Ethan's hand and pat Lily's head. The church's small fellowship hall filled with conversation and laughter as congregation members shared coffee and donuts. Lily munched happily on a chocolate-frosted donut while Ethan stood in a quiet corner, still processing everything that had happened. Michael approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Here, he said, handing one to Ethan. You look like you could use this. Did you tell them about? Ethan gestured vaguely. Michael nodded. Mrs. Thompson asked me about my story one day while you were at work. She's the one who suggested nominating you for the recognition. He paused. I hope you don't mind. Ethan looked down at the envelope in his hand, then at Lily chatting animatedly with some other children, her face smeared with chocolate. His throat tightened with emotion. Dad, Lily called out, running over to him. Mrs. Thompson says we're special angels. Are we? Ethan scooped her up in his arms, holding her close despite the donut frosting that would probably stain his shirt. Maybe things are turning around, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. Maybe they really are. The small grant check sat on Ethan's kitchen table, its promise of help both comforting and somehow insufficient. Through the window, the night pressed dark against the glass, broken only by the yellow glow of the porch light. Lily had gone to bed an hour ago, leaving Ethan and Michael alone with cups of coffee growing cold between them. Michael cleared his throat, his fingers tapping nervously against his mug. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Before everything fell apart, I wasn't just in real estate. I was someone people knew, someone who had connections. Ethan looked up from his coffee, studying Michael's face in the dim kitchen light. The man who'd become such a fixture in their lives these past weeks suddenly seemed different. as if a veil had lifted. I made mistakes, yes. Lost everything through poor decisions and trust in the wrong people. Michael's voice grew stronger. But not everyone from my past views me as a failure. I still know people, good people in the industry. People who might be able to help us track down the new owner of this house. Ethan's hands tightened around his mug. Michael, just listen, Michael interrupted gently. You've been working yourself to exhaustion. The grant is wonderful, but we both know it's not enough. Let me use what I have left, my contacts, my knowledge of the business. Let me try to negotiate with the new owner. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Ethan stood up abruptly, pacing the small space between counter and refrigerator. His shoulders were tense, his movements agitated. I can't ask you to do that, he finally said, his voice rough. You're already doing so much just by being here, helping with Lily. You didn't ask. I'm offering. Michael set his mug down with quiet determination. Remember that night on the overpass? I was ready to end everything, but you stopped. You cared. You brought me into your home despite barely having enough for yourself and Lily. Ethan stopped pacing, leaning against the counter. That's different. Anyone would have. No, Michael cut in firmly. Not anyone would have done what you did. Most people would have driven by, maybe called the police, but kept going. You didn't just save my life that night, you gave me back my dignity, my sense of worth. The truth of those words hung heavy in the air between them. Ethan remembered that bitter cold night, the desperation in Michael's eyes, so similar to what he saw in his own mirror now. I know it's hard for you to accept help, Michael continued softly. But this isn't charity, Ethan. This is friendship. This is family. Ethan's breath caught at that last word. He looked down the hallway toward Lily's room, where her newest drawing hung on the wall, 3 stick figures holding hands labeled Dad, me, and Uncle Michael. Michael stood up, approaching Ethan carefully. You saved me. Let me save you. The simple statement hit Ethan like a physical force. He remembered Lily's words from her card to Michael. God sent you to us. Maybe there was truth in that childlike wisdom. Maybe sometimes help came in unexpected ways, through unexpected people. I don't even know what you could do, Ethan admitted, his resistance beginning to crack. The house is already sold. Every sale has conditions, contingencies, possibilities, Michael explained, his old expertise showing through. Let me at least try to find out who bought it. Maybe we can work something out, a lease agreement, a rent-to-own situation. There are always options if you know where to look. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes. The weight of these past weeks, the constant worry about Lily's future, the exhaustion of working multiple jobs, it all pressed down on him. And here was Michael, offering not just help, but hope. You really think you can help? He asked quietly. Michael's face softened with understanding. I know I can try. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to try. The kitchen fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not the heavy quiet of desperation, but the gentle pause before a decision. Finally, Ethan straightened up. He looked at Michael, really looked at him, and saw not the broken man from the overpass, but someone who had found new purpose, someone who had become family. Okay, Ethan said simply, extending his hand. Okay, let's try. Michael grasped Ethan's hand firmly, the handshake sealing more than just an agreement. It was a moment of trust, of friendship, of 2 men acknowledging that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help when it's offered. We'll start first thing tomorrow, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise you, Ethan, we'll figure this out together. Ethan nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Together, he agreed, and in that word was all the trust and friendship that had grown between them since that fateful night on the overpass. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as Michael sat at the table, his old phone in hand. The screen showed dozens of names, former colleagues, business partners, and friends he hadn't spoken to in months. His fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through the contacts. Are you sure about this? Ethan asked, adjusting his delivery uniform. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed another restless night. Michael nodded, straightening his shoulders. These people, they knew me when I was at my best. Maybe that counts for something. Lily bounded into the kitchen, her backpack bouncing. Morning, Daddy! Morning, Uncle Michael! She grabbed a piece of toast from the plate between them, her smile bright enough to chase away some of their worry. After Ethan and Lily left, Michael took a deep breath and dialed the first number. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried another and another. Some numbers were disconnected, others rang endlessly. A few people answered but made polite excuses when they recognized his voice. By mid-morning, Michael's coffee had grown cold, and his hope was wearing thin. He stepped outside onto the small porch, needing fresh air. The neighborhood was quiet, just the distant sound of a lawnmower and children playing. This modest street had become home in ways his luxurious penthouse never had. His phone buzzed. A text from Tom Anderson, his former business partner. "Sorry to hear about your troubles. Been there. Call me." Michael's hands shook as he dialed. Tom answered on the second ring. "Michael Reynolds." Tom's warm voice carried through the line. "It's been too long. Tom, I wasn't sure you'd want to talk to me. We all hit rough patches. What's on your mind?" Michael explained Ethan's situation, his words tumbling out faster as he described the kind father who'd saved his life, the sweet little girl who made him cards, the unfair eviction notice. There was a long pause. "The property market's tough right now," Tom said finally. "But I might know someone. Can you meet for coffee this afternoon?" "Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tom." Meanwhile, across town, Ethan made his deliveries with renewed energy. Each package he handed over felt lighter, each "thank you" from customers warmer. During his lunch break, he sat in his truck and allowed himself to imagine keeping their home, watching Lily grow up in those familiar rooms. The afternoon wore on. Michael met Tom at a small cafe downtown, the same place they used to discuss million-dollar deals. Now they sat at a corner table, both older and humbler. "The buyer," Tom explained, stirring his coffee, "is Marcus Chen. Remember him? He always respected how you handled that difficult development project back in 19. Michael's eyes widened. "Marcus? I thought he'd retired." "Semi-retired. Still dabbles in property investment. He might be willing to work something out, especially given the circumstances." Back at home, Lily knelt beside her bed for her nightly prayers. Her stuffed animals sat in a row, a loyal audience. "Dear God," she whispered, "please help Daddy keep our home. And thank you for sending us Uncle Michael. He makes Daddy smile more." She climbed into bed just as Ethan came to tuck her in. "Did you say your prayers, sweetheart?" "Uh-huh. I asked God to help us stay here." Ethan's throat tightened as he pulled the blanket up to her chin. "That's good, honey. That's real good." After kissing her goodnight, Ethan sat in the living room, watching the clock. Michael had been gone for hours. The house felt emptier without him, as if his presence had somehow filled spaces Ethan hadn't known were vacant. At last, headlights swept across the front window. Ethan's heart jumped as he heard familiar footsteps on the porch. The door opened, and Michael stepped inside, his face tired but his eyes bright. "Tom Anderson met with me today," Michael said, settling into the armchair. A small, hopeful smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I think I may have found a path forward." Ethan leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. The night pressed against the windows, but inside, the room seemed to glow with possibility. The morning was crisp and clear as Ethan and Michael walked into the downtown office building. Their reflections in the polished marble floor looked out of place. Ethan, in his cleanest but well-worn button-down shirt, and Michael in borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit right. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan whispered, tugging at his collar. The lobby's grandeur made him feel smaller with each step. Michael nodded, though his own confidence seemed to waver. "Tom's a reasonable man. He always was." He pressed the elevator button for the 12th floor. Inside the elevator, Ethan's stomach churned. He'd barely slept last night, lying awake thinking about Lily's future. This meeting felt like their last chance. The grant money from the church wasn't nearly enough, and time was running out. The elevator doors opened to a reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows. A young woman looked up from her desk. "Mr. Anderson is expecting you," she said with a practiced smile. Tom Anderson's office was spacious, but surprisingly modest. Family photos lined the walls, and a collection of Little League trophies sat on a shelf. The man himself stood as they entered, tall, silver-haired, wearing a casual sweater rather than a suit. "Michael," Tom said warmly, extending his hand. "It's good to see you." His grip was firm, his smile genuine. He turned to Ethan. "And you must be Mr. Parker. Please, have a seat." They settled into comfortable leather chairs. Tom leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Michael filled me in on the basics, but I'd like to hear more from you, Mr. Parker." Ethan's throat felt dry. It's about my daughter." "Really? Lily?" "She's 10. He pulled out his wallet, hands slightly shaking, and showed Tom a photo of Lily in her school play costume. "That house? It's been our home since she was 3. After her mother left." He swallowed hard. "I've never missed a rent payment, not one." Tom studied the photo, his expression softening. "She looks like a wonderful girl." "She is," Ethan said. "She's everything to me. And now, with this eviction..." His voice cracked slightly. Michael jumped in. Tom, if we could work out some kind of arrangement, a rent-to-own setup maybe? Ethan's reliable, hardworking. Tom held up his hand, his face growing serious. I want to be straight with you both. He pulled out a folder, spreading architectural drawings across his desk. The property isn't just changing hands, it's part of a larger development plan. Ethan's heart sank as he looked at the drawings. Modern apartment buildings, retail spaces, a whole new neighborhood where his modest home now stood. We've already broken ground on phase 1, Tom continued, his voice gentle but firm. The contracts are signed. The bulldozers are scheduled. He looked at Michael. You know how these things work. Once the wheels are in motion, there has to be something, Michael insisted. Some way to… It's too late, Tom said firmly. He closed the folder with a quiet finality. I'm truly sorry. If there was any flexibility, any way to work this out. He shook his head. The best I can do is give you a reference for other rental properties in the area. Ethan sat very still, feeling the floor drop out from under him. The room seemed to blur at the edges. He was vaguely aware of more conversation, Michael arguing, Tom explaining something about zoning laws and contracts, but it all sounded distant, like he was underwater. The walk out of the building passed in a haze. Michael kept talking, suggesting other options, making plans, but Ethan barely heard him. At the bus stop, Michael tried to put a hand on his shoulder, but Ethan shrugged it off. I need to walk, he said quietly. Clear my head. Let me come with you. No. Ethan's voice was hollow. I need to be alone right now. The 3-mile walk home felt like 300. Each step was heavy, each breath painful. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and Ethan watched his own shadow stretch and shrink as he passed under trees and buildings. He thought about Lily's room, with its butterfly wallpaper they'd put up together one weekend. The height marks on the kitchen doorframe, tracking her growth. The backyard where she'd learned to ride her bike. All of it would be gone, reduced to rubble under those bulldozers. When he finally reached their street, the sight of their little house hit him like a physical blow. Lily was sitting on the porch steps, homework spread around her, face lighting up as she spotted him. Daddy! She jumped up, papers scattering. How did it go? Can we stay? Ethan tried to speak, but his throat closed up. He looked at his daughter, his brave, beautiful girl who deserved so much more than he could give her, and something inside him finally broke. His knees gave out, and he sank onto the steps. Sobs tore from his chest, harsh and raw. I'm so sorry, baby, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I tried everything. Lily's arms wrapped around his neck, small and warm. Daddy, don't cry, she whispered, but he couldn't stop. I failed you, he sobbed, holding her close. I promised to take care of you, and I failed. The setting sun painted their little porch in shades of gold and shadow as father and daughter clung to each other, their world crumbling around them. The next morning, Ethan woke to an empty couch. Michael's borrowed blanket was neatly folded, placed on the cushions with careful precision. The sight made Ethan's stomach twist with worry. Uncle Michael? Lily called out, padding into the living room in her sock feet. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, eyes scanning the quiet house. Where is he, Daddy? Ethan swallowed hard, forcing a smile. He probably just went for a walk, sweetie. Let's get you ready for school. But as he packed Lily's lunch, peanut butter and jelly with the crust cut off, just the way she liked it, dread settled in his chest like a heavy stone. The memory of that night on the overpass flashed through his mind. Michael's despair had been raw, real. What if the disappointment of failing to help had pushed him back to that dark place? The first day crawled by. Ethan checked his phone between deliveries, hoping for a message. Nothing. That evening, he drove past the overpass, heart pounding as he scanned the walkway. Empty. Maybe he left a note somewhere, Lily suggested at dinner, pushing her macaroni around her plate. Like a treasure hunt? Maybe, sweetheart. Ethan couldn't bring himself to dash her hopes, even as his own faded with each passing hour. The second day was harder. Lily's questions became more worried, her usual bounce missing from her step. Did we do something wrong, Daddy? Is that why Uncle Michael left? No, baby. Sometimes. Ethan struggled to find the right words. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. It's not your fault at all. That night, after tucking Lily in, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills. The eviction notice seemed to mock him from its place on the refrigerator, held by a chipped magnet shaped like a sunflower one Lily had made in art class. 23 days left. The numbers on the overdue notices blurred as exhaustion and worry took their toll. 3 days turned to 4. Ethan threw himself into work, picking up extra shifts that left his back aching and his feet blistered. He smiled for Lily, helped with her homework, and pretended everything was fine. But each time he passed the empty couch, his chest tightened with guilt and fear. "Please be okay," he whispered to the silence one night, standing in the dark living room. "Please don't let me have failed you too." By the 5th day, Lily had stopped asking about Michael directly, but Ethan caught her looking at the card she'd made him, still propped on the windowsill. She'd added more hearts around the edges, as if the extra love might somehow bring him back. Ethan's own hope wavered like a candle in the wind. He'd thought they were building something of friendship, maybe even a kind of family. Had it all been as fragile as morning frost? The 6th day brought rain, heavy drops that matched Ethan's mood as he trudged through his deliveries. Each package felt heavier than the last, weighed down by worry and regret. Should he have done more? Said more? The questions chased each other in endless circles. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a stack of bills spread before him like a losing hand of cards. The cheap overhead light cast harsh shadows across the papers, late notices, final warnings, and the ever-present eviction notice. He rubbed his tired eyes, trying to make the numbers add up differently. The old clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time's relentless march toward their deadline. Lily was already asleep upstairs. Her prayers for Michael's return whispered faithfully each night. Ethan wished he had her unwavering faith. The sudden knock at the door made him jump, scattering papers across the floor. For a moment, he just sat there, heart racing. Another knock, more insistent this time. Ethan pushed back his chair, steps quick but cautious as he approached the door. Through the peephole, a familiar figure stood in the yellow porch light, raindrops glistening on his shoulders. He yanked the door open. Michael? There stood Michael, soaked from the rain but standing straight and tall, nothing like the broken man from the overpass. His eyes burned with determination, a fire Ethan hadn't seen before. "I'm sorry I disappeared," Michael said, water dripping from his coat. "But I had to try something, had to make it right." Michael sat at Ethan's kitchen table, his eyes bright with renewed purpose. "I've been digging, making calls. The property buyer, it's David Chin. We used to work together years ago, before everything fell apart." Ethan leaned forward, gripping his coffee mug tightly. "You know him?" "Better than that. We were partners on several developments back in the day." Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "David was always different from the others, honest, compassionate. Even when my company went under, he never spoke badly of me." Lily peeked around the corner, still in her pajamas, her eyes wide at seeing Michael back. He smiled and waved her over. She rushed to hug him, burying her face in his sweater. "We missed you, Uncle Michael," she whispered. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Michael's voice cracked slightly, "But I had to try something, and maybe it wasn't all for nothing." Ethan watched them, his throat tight. The past few days without Michael had been darker than he'd expected, the absence of their newfound friend weighing heavily on them both. "So what happens now?" David agreed to meet us tomorrow at the corner cafe downtown. Michael gently patted Lily's back as she continued to cling to him. 9 o'clock. He remembers me, Ethan. He's willing to listen. That night, after Lily went to bed, Ethan paced the living room. Michael watched from the couch, now spread with fresh blankets that Lily had insisted on arranging herself. "What if it doesn't work?" Ethan finally asked, voicing his deepest fear. "I can't get her hopes up again just to—" "Then we try something else," Michael interrupted firmly. "But David's different. Trust me on this." The next morning dawned gray and cool. Ethan stood in front of his closet, staring at his limited selection of clothes. He finally chose his one decent button-down shirt, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences, and his least-worn pair of jeans. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door had agreed to watch Lily before school. As they walked over, Lily squeezed Ethan's hand. "It's gonna be okay, Daddy. I prayed extra hard last night." The corner cafe sat on a busy intersection, its windows steamy with warmth against the morning chill. Michael was already waiting outside, wearing a borrowed tie from Ethan that seemed incongruous with his worn jacket. "Ready?" Michael asked, straightening his shoulders. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Together, they pushed through the cafe's door, a small bell announcing their arrival. David Chin sat in a corner booth, a laptop open in front of him. He was younger than Ethan had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He stood as they approached, immediately reaching out to grasp Michael's hand. "Michael Reynolds," David said warmly. "It's been too long, David." Michael's voice held a mix of respect and hope. "Thank you for meeting us." They settled into the booth, ordering coffee from a passing waitress. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around the warm mug. "So," David began, looking between them, Michael tells me there's a situation we need to discuss. Michael nodded, leaning forward. David, this is Ethan Parker. He's been renting the property on Maple Street that your company recently acquired. Ah, yes. David pulled up some files on his laptop. The development project. We're planning to renovate several properties in that area. Ethan's heart sank, but Michael pressed on. Ethan's been there for 5 years, never missed a rent payment until recently. He's a single father, works multiple jobs to provide for his daughter. David's eyes shifted to Ethan, assessing but not unkind. Tell me about your daughter, Lily. Ethan said softly. She's 10. That house, it's the only home she's ever known. She has her height marks on the kitchen doorframe, her favorite reading spot under the bay window. He trailed off, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. And how do you know Michael? David asked, his expression thoughtful. Ethan glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. I found him on the overpass about 2 weeks ago. He was having a rough time. I couldn't just drive by, so I stopped. Talked to him. Brought him home for dinner. Even though you were struggling yourself? David raised an eyebrow. Sometimes helping someone else helps you too, Ethan said simply. David sat back, studying them both. His fingers drummed lightly on the table as he considered. After what felt like an eternity, he leaned forward again. Michael was one of the most honest men I ever worked with, he said slowly. When his company failed, he could have done what others did, hidden assets, declared bankruptcy, left his creditors hanging. Instead, he sold everything he had to pay what he could. It cost him dearly, but he did the right thing. Michael looked down at his coffee, his expression pained at the memories. And now, David continued, here he is, fighting just as hard for you, Mr. Parker. That tells me something about both of you. He turned to his laptop, typing quickly. The development plans aren't set in stone. We could modify them, perhaps work out an arrangement. He looked up, meeting Ethan's desperate gaze. Maybe we can work something out. David Chen studied the documents spread across the cafe table, his fingers drumming thoughtfully against his coffee cup. The morning crowd bustled around them, but in their corner booth, time seemed to stand still. The property has good bones, David mused, looking up at Ethan. And you've been maintaining it well, from what I can see. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Yes, sir. I do all the repairs myself. Changed the water heater last spring, fixed the garage door mechanism. Please, just David. He smiled, pushing his glasses up. And that's exactly the kind of tenant, or should I say homeowner, I like to work with. Michael leaned forward slightly, his eyes hopeful. Then you'll consider it? David closed his laptop, folding his hands on top of it. I've reviewed the financials Michael sent over. While the property was initially marked for development, there's no reason we can't restructure this arrangement. He pulled out a fresh document from his briefcase. I'm proposing a rent-to-own agreement. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Under the table, his hands clenched into fists to stop their trembling. Here's how it would work, David continued, pointing to different sections of the document. You'd continue paying monthly rent, but a portion, let's say 30%, would go toward equity in the house. After 5 years, you'd have the option to purchase at a pre-agreed price, with all your equity payments counted toward the purchase. The numbers swam before Ethan's eyes. The monthly payment was higher than his current rent, but not impossibly so. With his new side jobs and careful budgeting. There is, of course, the matter of the initial deposit, David added carefully. It's necessary to secure the agreement. Ethan's hope faltered. Even with the church's grant money, he was nowhere near having enough for a substantial deposit. He opened his mouth to speak, but Michael cut in smoothly. I'd like to cover the deposit, Michael said, his voice steady. As an investment in a friend. Ethan turned to him, stunned. Michael, no, that's too much. I can't. You can, and you will. Michael's eyes were firm but kind. Consider it a business arrangement if it makes you feel better. I'm investing in property with someone I trust completely. He smiled slightly. Besides, where else am I going to find such comfortable couch accommodations? David watched this exchange with interest, a small smile playing at his lips. That would certainly solve our immediate concerns. He pushed the agreement closer to Ethan. Take it home, read it carefully. Have a lawyer look it over if you'd like. But I think you'll find the terms fair. The waitress appeared with fresh coffee, and Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm mug, trying to ground himself in the moment. It felt surreal, like a dream he might wake from at any second. I don't know what to say, he managed finally. Say you'll think about it, David suggested kindly. Though I should mention, he glanced at Michael with a knowing look. Your friend here has been quite persistent on your behalf. Called me 3 times before I agreed to this meeting. Michael looked slightly embarrassed. I might have been a bit determined. The Michael Reynolds I remember always was, David gathered his things, standing. I have another meeting, but take the weekend to review everything. My contact information is on the first page. He extended his hand to Ethan. I look forward to doing business with you, Mr. Parker. After David left, Ethan and Michael sat in silence for a long moment. The morning sun had broken through the clouds, sending warm rays through the cafe windows. Around them, the breakfast crowd thinned as people hurried off to work. Michael, Ethan finally said, his voice rough with emotion. I can't let you pay that deposit. It's too much. You didn't let me jump that night, Michael replied quietly. You didn't let me give up when I had nothing left. You gave me a home when I was lost. He pulled out his checkbook, an old-fashioned gesture that somehow felt right for the moment. The night you saved me, you gave me back my life. Now it's my turn. He wrote out the check with steady hands, the amount making Ethan's eyes widen. This isn't charity, Michael continued. This is me believing in you, the way you believed in me. It's an investment in our future, yours, Lily's, and yes, mine too, if you'll have me around. Ethan stared at the check, then at the agreement. His vision blurred slightly. Lily's going to be over the moon, he whispered. She's been so scared, though she tries not to show it. She's strong, like her father. Michael smiled, then pushed back his chair. Come on, let's go tell her the good news. They stood together, gathering the papers. Ethan's hands were shaking as he carefully folded the agreement into his jacket pocket. Just before they reached the door, he stopped, turning to Michael. Words failed him for a moment as the full weight of what had just happened crashed over him. Finally, he reached out and clasped Michael's hands in his own, his grip tight with emotion. You've given us our home back, he whispered, voice breaking. Ethan's hand trembled as he held the pen over the final line of the contract. The black ink seemed to shimmer before his eyes, and he had to blink away tears that threatened to fall. This wasn't just a signature. It was the key to his daughter's future, the promise of stability they'd been praying for. Just sign here, Mr. Parker, David Chin said kindly, pointing to the marked line. And the house will be yours to own, one payment at a time. Ethan took a deep breath and signed his name. The letters were shaky but clear, marking the moment everything changed. Michael stood beside him, a steady presence that had become as familiar as family over these past weeks. Congratulations, David said, gathering the papers and sliding a copy toward Ethan. Welcome to homeownership. Back at the house, Lily was waiting on the front steps, bouncing with nervous energy. When she saw their faces, she knew before they said a word. Her eyes went wide, and a smile spread across her face like sunshine breaking through clouds. Really? She whispered. Really? Ethan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Really, sweetheart. This is our home now. For keeps. Lily let out a squeal of pure joy and launched herself into the house, her feet barely touching the ground as she danced from room to room. We're staying, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. We're staying. Her excitement was contagious. Ethan couldn't help but laugh as he watched her twirl through the living room, her arms spread wide as if embracing the whole house. She rushed into the kitchen, then up the stairs to her bedroom, announcing to each space, You're ours now. Michael stepped out onto the front porch, giving Ethan a moment alone. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worn wooden boards, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees that had sheltered their home for so long. Ethan found himself sinking to his knees right there in the living room, his hands clasped together naturally, and tears flowed freely now as he bowed his head. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible over Lily's continued celebration upstairs. Thank you for sending us an angel when we needed one most. Through the window, he could see Michael on the porch, his broad shoulders slightly hunched as he gazed out at the street. A single tear tracked down Michael's cheek, catching the late afternoon light before falling. Ethan knew that Michael was thinking about that night on the overpass, about how close he'd come to missing all of this. Lily came thundering back down the stairs, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Daddy, can I hang up my new drawings now, since it's really our house? Of course you can, Princess, Ethan said, wiping his eyes quickly and standing up. But first, how about we start getting dinner ready? I think this calls for something special. He pulled out the roast chicken he'd splurged on that morning, hoping against hope that they'd have reason to celebrate. The grocery store bag also held real potatoes for mashing, fresh green beans, and even a small apple pie from the bakery section. Uncle Michael, Lily called out the front door. You have to help us cook. It's a family dinner. Michael turned, and the smile on his face was worth every penny of the meal. He came back inside, rolling up his sleeves. Well, I make pretty good mashed potatoes, if I do say so myself. They worked together in the small kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing as they prepared the feast. Lily insisted on setting the table with their fancy plates, the ones that didn't have any chips in them. She even found an old candle in a drawer and placed it in the center of the table. The smell of roasting chicken filled the house, mixing with the sound of Lily's chatter as she told Michael about all the plans she had for her room now that they were staying. She wanted to paint it yellow, she declared, like sunshine. "Yellow's a perfect color for you," Michael said, carefully mashing the potatoes while Ethan checked the chicken. "It matches your smile." When everything was ready, they gathered around the table. The chicken was golden brown, the potatoes were creamy white, and the green beans added a splash of color to their plates. Lily's candle flickered in the center, casting a warm glow over their faces. Before they ate, Lily reached out and took both Ethan's and Michael's hands. "Can I say grace?" she asked. "Of course," Ethan said softly. "Dear God," Lily began, her small voice clear and sure. "Thank you for letting us keep our house. Thank you for sending us Uncle Michael. And thank you for making us a family. And thank you for this yummy chicken. Amen." "Amen," Ethan and Michael echoed, their voices rough with emotion. The food tasted better than any fancy restaurant meal. They passed dishes back and forth, their plates piled high with second helpings. Lily told stories about school between bites, and Michael shared memories of learning to cook from his grandmother. Ethan just sat back sometimes, watching them, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was what home felt like. Not just the walls and roof, but the love and laughter that filled the spaces between them. The way Lily's eyes sparkled in the candlelight, the sound of Michael's deep chuckle at her jokes, the knowledge that tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, they would still be here, together. "Who wants pie?" Ethan asked when the dinner plates were nearly clean. "Me?" Lily's hand shot up. "Can we eat it in the living room, please?" Ethan pretended to think about it. "Well, I suppose this is a special occasion." They carried their dessert plates to the living room, settling onto the old couch that had seen better days, but now felt like the most comfortable place in the world. Lily squeezed between Ethan and Michael, balancing her pie carefully as she snuggled in. The apple pie was sweet and warm, the crust flaky and perfect. Outside, the sky was turning purple with sunset, casting long shadows through the windows. But inside, in their home, their forever home, everything was bright and golden with joy. The early February sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow across the worn linoleum floor. Michael stood at the sink, his sleeves rolled up as he washed the breakfast dishes. The simple routine had become familiar, comfortable, like he'd always been there. "Uncle Michael," Lily's voice rang out from the living room. "Can you help me with my science homework after this?" "Sure thing, kiddo," Michael called back, a smile spreading across his face. The title, Uncle, still made his heart swell every time he heard it. Ethan watched from the doorway, sipping his morning coffee. The sight of Michael, once a stranger on that cold overpass, now moving so naturally through their home, filled him with a quiet joy. The man who'd been ready to end it all just weeks ago now hummed softly while doing dishes, looking more alive with each passing day. "Dad, look what I made in art class!" Lily bounded into the kitchen, holding up a piece of construction paper. Her pigtails bounced with excitement as she presented her masterpiece. Ethan set down his coffee cup and knelt to examine the drawing. 3 figures stood hand in hand in front of a simple house, one tall with brown hair, another with graying temples, and a smaller figure with yellow pigtails. Above them, written in careful letters, "My family." Michael dried his hands and came closer, his breath catching as he saw himself included in the picture. Lily had even drawn his favorite blue sweater, the one he wore most days. "That's us," Lily explained proudly, pointing to each figure. "See? There's you, Daddy, and there's Uncle Michael, and that's me. And that's our house, the one we get to keep forever now." Ethan wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders, unable to speak for a moment. Michael cleared his throat, clearly fighting his own emotion. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Ethan finally managed. "You captured us perfectly." The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Michael helped Lily with her homework each afternoon, explaining fractions with patient determination. His business experience translated surprisingly well into teaching math, and Lily's understanding grew with each lesson. In the evenings, they shared simple meals around the kitchen table. Sometimes Michael cooked, proving himself handy with a skillet. Other times, Ethan prepared his mother's old recipes, filling the house with familiar aromas that made it feel even more like home. One afternoon, Ethan came home from his delivery route to find Michael and Lily in the backyard. They had cleared away dead branches and were planting a small vegetable garden for spring. "We can grow tomatoes here," Michael was saying, gesturing to a sunny spot, "and maybe some herbs along the fence. Can we plant flowers too? Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Yellow ones, like sunshine? Of course we can, Michael assured her. This is your home now, we can make it beautiful. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan found an old picture frame in the hall closet. He carefully dusted it off, thinking how perfect it would be for Lily's drawing. The frame had belonged to his grandmother, its simple wooden edges worn smooth with age. Michael helped him clean the glass, both men working in comfortable silence. When they were finished, Ethan carefully positioned Lily's artwork inside, making sure it was perfectly centered. You know, Michael said softly, when you found me that night, I thought I had nothing left to live for. He touched the glass gently, tracing the outline of the figures Lily had drawn. I never imagined I'd find a family. Ethan gripped Michael's shoulder. Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, he said, or the ones that choose us. Together, they found the perfect spot on the living room wall right where the afternoon sun would catch it, making the colors glow. Ethan hammered a nail with careful precision, then stepped back to let Michael help him hang the frame. The drawing looked right at home there, as if the wall had been waiting for it all along. The three figures seemed to smile out at the room, their crayon-drawn hands linked in an unbreakable chain. Perfect, Michael whispered. Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Who would have thought that one act of kindness on a cold January night would lead to this? That by reaching out to save a stranger, he would end up saving his own family too? The framed drawing watched over their living room, like a promise made permanent, a reminder that sometimes the most precious gifts come disguised as moments of crisis, and that family isn't always about blood, but about the hearts that choose to beat in harmony together. The spring evening wrapped around them like a soft blanket, warm and gentle after the harsh winter they'd endured. Ethan, Michael, and Lily sat on the front porch steps of their modest home, watching as the sky painted itself in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. The air carried the sweet scent of newly bloomed flowers from Mrs. Henderson's garden next door. Lily sat between the two men, her small legs swinging back and forth as she pointed at the clouds. That one looks like a dragon, she exclaimed, her finger tracing the shape in the air. I see it, Michael chuckled, leaning back on his elbows. His face had filled out since that January night, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by a quiet contentment. And there's one that looks like a castle. Ethan watched them both, his heart full. The past few months had transformed their lives in ways he never could have imagined. The house that had once felt like a burden now truly felt like home, filled with laughter and shared meals and homework sessions at the kitchen table. A cool breeze rustled through the newly leafed trees, carrying the distant sound of children playing in the neighborhood. Ethan's mind drifted back to that bitter winter night, when he'd spotted a lone figure standing on the edge of the overpass. The memory made him shiver, despite the warm evening air. I still remember driving home that night, Ethan said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I was so tired from my shift, but something made me look up at just the right moment. Michael's expression grew thoughtful. He reached over and squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. I remember hearing your father's voice cutting through the darkness. I was in such a dark place, but his words, they reached something in me I thought was dead. Lily looked between them, her young face serious. She knew pieces of the story, carefully edited for her age, but she understood enough to know that something important had happened that night. I'm glad you listened to Daddy, she said, leaning against Michael's arm, because now you're part of our family. Michael's eyes glistened in the fading light. That night you saved me, he said, looking at Ethan. And in saving me, you saved yourself too. Ethan nodded, understanding the truth in those words. His act of kindness that night had set in motion a chain of events that had secured their future. The house that had almost slipped through their fingers was now slowly becoming their own, thanks to Michael's connections and guidance. I remember how cold it was, Ethan continued, wrapping an arm around Lily. But I just kept talking, saying anything I could think of. I told you about Lily, about hope, about how life can surprise you when you least expect it. You were right, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Life did surprise me. Instead of an ending, I found a beginning. The sunset had deepened now, painting the sky in deeper purples and blues. A few early stars had begun to twinkle overhead. The streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light along their quiet street. Lily yawned and snuggled closer between them. Can we have hot chocolate? She asked, her eyes already growing heavy. Even though it's spring? Why not? Ethan smiled. Special occasion, right? What's the occasion? Lily asked, perking up slightly. Being together? Michael answered simply. Being family. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as more stars appeared in the darkening sky. The evening air had grown slightly cooler, but none of them wanted to move just yet. These quiet moments together had become precious to all of them. "You know what I've learned?" Ethan said, looking at his daughter and the man who had become like a brother to him. "Family isn't about blood. It's about love." Lily curled up between them, her head resting against Ethan's shoulder while her feet pressed against Michael's leg. The three of them sat there, bound together by something stronger than circumstance or genetics, bound by choice, by love, by the simple act of reaching out to help another human being. The night settled around them, peaceful and secure, full of promise for all the tomorrows yet to come. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Parker, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.